principles and standards, some of the testing methods and difficulties. This chapter is more like a survey. We will not go too much deep into it. Information is readily available in many public forums. The outline is like this. First, a description of generic EMC requirements, concentrating on the requirements in the USA and European Union, and some comments on EMC standard testing. Then, in Module 2, principles of various test methods and some of the common difficulties involved. This chapter will not cover details of various EMC standards or test methods because these are always changing all the time, and one need to always look for the most recent updates. And EMC standards are, in general, the kind of a common consensus among the regulatory bodies representing the government, various industries and consumers. What are the EMC requirements? Which we have seen in chapter 1 and 2, the general principles. The standards exist to mirror the requirements set by governing bodies in a country or region. Now, the most essential requirement of any EMC directive issued by a government as regards to systems and products, it is about how electromagnetic disturbance, when it is generated, is not exceeding certain levels, allowing radio and communication equipment and other devices to operate as intended. And also it deals with products that should have adequate levels of intrinsic immunity to electromagnetic disturbance. So one is the emission should not be more than a certain level. So this is covered by various instructions on how to test for emissions from equipments and devices, so that other devices are working as intended without disturbance. Then when it comes to immunity testing, adequate levels of intrinsic immunity is specified, and test methods for that are also specified, so that equipments are working in its intended environment as it should. So standards are really a consensus position between the various actors together, and it does not solve all the issues of EMC, because if you really want to design system that it should never fail or disturb other systems, then it can be very expensive. So you need to have some reasonable limits and reasonable immunity. So standards specify test levels as well as test methods, and there are many different standards issued by different bodies. Say, for example, International Electrotechnical Commission has several standards issued based on the regulations given by other regulators in USA or Europe. Then you have European norms. Usually IEC and European norms, they are kind of the same. Then you have this industry standards, CISPR. Then FCC, Federal Communication Agency Committee of the USA. And you have this US military standards. So these are also widely adopted military standards. Any equipment that are sold to US military or US military establishments has to comply with this. Now, what are the things tested? So this is from chapter 1, explaining the different ways of having interference. You have this conducted emission. Due to that, you can have EMC issues. Then corollary to that, conducted immunity, then radiated emission and radiated immunity. So all these things are covered under various EMC standards. And there will be test methods specified also. Now, this can happen in various kinds of environment. There are 3 commonly used environment: home and offices, industrial environment. So in industrial environment, you have higher thresholds for emission and immunity. Then you have military environment, where you expect extremely harsh environment. In addition to that, you have special cases like civil aviation, then other radio and communication equipments specifically intended for those purposes. The 2 of the most followed EMC regulations around the world are from US and EU. That is because most of the products made in, say for example, in China, end up in US or EU. And not only that, these were the two places where for the first time EMC was taken seriously as most advanced economies, and they started to making regulations, and other countries usually follow those regulations, adopt it into their national practice. So in the USA, the body responsible for regulation of EMC emission is the Federal Communication Commission, FCC. So the FCC Declaration of Conformity, it is called FCC label or FCC mark. It is a certification mark employed on electronic products manufactured or sold in the United States, and it certifies that the electromagnetic interference from devices is under limits approved by the Federal Communication Commission. So it's a very powerful body, FCC. So this is the symbol for the FCC label. The corresponding body in EU is the European Union, various directives of the European Union. So one particular directive for EMC is the EMC Directive 2014/30/EU. So this is the latest one. And the compliance certificate CE marking is provided when this, as a mark that these directives are fulfilled. So this is the symbol for CE. So in many products, you can see either this or sometimes both, if a product is intended for both places. Now we will see more details of EMC directive below. So EMC requirement 2014/30/EU. Any electrical or electronic product marketed in countries belonging to the European Economic Community must meet the requirements of the European Union's Electromagnetic Compatibility Directive. Now, there are some important and interesting parts that we can highlight here. Say, for example, Clause 8 says that the equipment covered by this directive should include both apparatus and fixed installations, because apparatus are not stationary or standing alone. It is connected to the fixed installations often. 20 says that it is necessary to ensure that products from third countries entering the Union market comply with this directive. So any product made in India, China, or Thailand, or Brazil entering European Union also should comply with this directive. So the directive has a worldwide reach in that way. The fixed installation, including large machines and networks, may generate electromagnetic disturbance or affected by it. In terms of electromagnetic compatibility, it is irrelevant whether the electromagnetic disturbance is produced by the apparatus or by a fixed installation. Accordingly, fixed installations and apparatus should be subject to a coherent and comprehensive regime of essential requirements. This we have seen in the first example we notice here. So here the noise may be produced by the DC motor over here, but then it goes to the power system and get distributed. So for this sensitive circuit, it may be like that it is this fixed installation that is giving out this noise, and from there it will be radiating also. So all these things are coming together in the electromagnetic environment. Now, the CE marking indicating the conformity of apparatus is the visible consequence of a whole process comprising conformity assessment in the broad sense. Now, how this assessment is to be done? So this is what the standards are specifying. So these are just what are the requirements will be set by this directive. The standards will tell how a class of equipment should be tested, what kind of test methods are to be used, what are the levels for conducted emission, conducted immunity, radiated emission, radiated immunity, and how do you interpret the test results, all these things. So then after all this process, the equipment will be given this certification, which is a legal requirement. Now, due to their specific characteristic, fixed installation need not be subjected to affixing of the CE marking or to the EU declaration of conformity. However, in the testing of the individual products, the fixed installation has to be somehow, this characteristic has to be included. Now, some important systems are covered by other regulations. So, for example, radio equipment and telecommunication terminals equipment. So, it has got its own directive. They have some, due to the sensitive nature, they have some other special requirements. Similarly, aircraft or equipment intended to be fitted into aircraft, they have extremely stringent conditions to be met. So that also is covered by special international rules. So when designing a system, it is important to consider the most likely EM environment that the system will be placed in. So the testing is done accordingly, and CE marking or FCC marking is given accordingly. But many of these equipments can be quite generic, and it may be that they will be used in other environments also. For example, a normal laptop, it is tested against a standard for residential equipment because that is where mostly it will be used. But you can carry a laptop into an industrial environment with a harsher EM environment and use it over there. But then, of course, that laptop is not really suitable for those environment. Now, industrial systems are tested against harsher disturbance and are allowed to have higher levels of emission. So this we can see in this. So what is shown here, this extract is from IEC standard 610061, electromagnetic compatibility. 61 is generic standards for immunity of residential, commercial and light industrial environments. Similarly, you have this extension 2 of the same standard that covers immunity for industrial environments. So you can see that immunity levels are different for both standards, especially between 80 megahertz and 1 gigahertz. For normal residential and offices, it is 3 volts per meter. So up to 3 volts per meter fails, it should withstand. Even if it fails at 4 volts per meter, it doesn't matter. Still, it is as per conformity. Whereas if that equipment is to be used in industrial environment, the specification is 10 volts per meter because you have harsher environment for the industry for this particular frequency. For other frequencies, they tend to be the same. So the environment where the equipment is to be used, that also is coming into these standards. To elaborate on this, a system is bought from an industrial supplier and it has been tested against industrial environments, some kind of a system. And if it is installed in a research lab or home, it can cause EMI because it is permitted to emit much larger noise than that normally you will find at home or light offices. So this, where it is going to be used is very important. Now, a component may be CE marked. It only shows that that particular component does not emit more than specified in that particular environment for that particular frequency band. Of course, it does not prevent that component from emitting beyond those specified bands or being immune beyond that specified bands. So CE marking is not really any test for well-designed component or the quality of the component. How important this is, you have seen when we discussed about intentional EMI, where the disturbances can be, need not follow any standard pathways or standard specification. It can be anything. So there can be some equipment under CE marking that can be more vulnerable than other equipment under CE marking in non-ideal situations. So one example can be given here using lamps. So this is taken from this particular publications on comparison of conducted EMI emission and electrical performance of lamps. So this is the conducted emission limits, what is shown here, dB microvolt. So that is coming from this European norm 55015 class B conducted. So as per the standard test procedures, it is done. So all these devices are kind of conforming to this standard. They are below this particular limit. So these are the normal incandescent lamp, 40 watt. You can see the noise. Then you have this energy saving lamp, 8 watt. The noise produced by that. Then you have this compact fluorescent lamps, 36 watts. And this also is another compact fluorescent lamp, another make. So you can see that depending upon the make, you can have many different type of noises. Now, well, these products satisfy this standard, no problem. But suppose if you are in a laboratory doing very sensitive measurements, then for general lighting purposes, you can choose any of these things. But depending upon the sensitive nature of the experiments that you are conducting in your research lab, Some of these lamps may be more suitable than the other lamps. So just because one product conform to the standard does not mean that all of them are the same for that particular application. They may have different noise levels being produced. Only thing it says that it is below the limit specified. Thank you. That is end of module 1.